We just finished riding the 2020 Honda Africa Twin DCT. This is the base model with DCT, and this is the bike that Honda says is more off-road slanted than the Adventure Sports. So first off, we're going to talk about the engine, because that's one of the main changes for 2020. It is now a 1084cc parallel twin. Before it was 998 cc's, so gains almost 100 cc's, but more importantly, it gains about 6% of power increase, and you can actually feel it. It does make a massive difference in the throttle response, the torque, and the horsepower on this bike. The old DCT model, really wasn't a fan of it, and part of that was it just didn't seem to have enough oomph to be really sporty, powerful, and fun. Where now, with the power output it has now, it's really fun. It actually wheelies out of corners if you turn the wheelie control off. It just gets off of the corners better, and it has a little bit more torquey character off-road as well. But there's some improvements that aren't really improvements. One of those being the new TFT dash. It's big, it's bright, and it looks fancy as all get up. But problem is, it's super complicated to use. I think if you were an owner of it, you might get used to those complications and find your way around the system a little bit more. But I've been on this bike for 2 days and I still can't figure it out. There's all kinds of different menus. There's dashes tied to ride modes. So ride mode, you've got a touring, a gravel, an off-road, an urban, user 1, user 2. So there's 6 modes. Plus, you can change the screen 3 different ways in each of those modes. So now you're 18 different screen variations. And then inside of those screens, each of them acts differently. So the one with all the information, it's called the gold screen. It shows your wheelie control, your ABS, your gravel mode, power modes, engine brake control, or engine braking, I should say, power, and traction control. And it's just a mess. Some of them, the circle, 1 bar you would think would be the least amount of power, but it's actually the most amount of power. And then you go to the next one, which is engine braking, and the one after that, that's right next to it, which is the traction control. 1 bar is the least, and most bars is the most. So things contradict themselves, and it's really hard to figure your way around this stuff. Not to mention you have a bajillion buttons on the handlebars. It makes a Goldwing jealous with the amount of buttons it has. As I said before, this is the DCT model. So that means it's got an automatic transmission. Does not have a clutch, does not have a shift lever. Basically, the bike does the shifting for you in drive mode and sport mode. Drive, it's basically just like the automatic transmission of your car. And it works pretty well in drive mode, except that it shifts really, really early and it lugs the motor. So there was a point where I was going 40 miles an hour down a back road, and it was in 6th gear at like 1500 RPM. It's just like chug, 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 chug. So they're going for economy, but it may have gone a little too far. I'm sure it gets amazing gas mileage running it at 1500 RPM, but it adds a lot of vibration to the ride. Sport, it holds a higher gear, or I should say a higher RPM, waits later to shift, and it's really sporty. It's pretty fun. If I'm just scooting around town, I just put it in sport, and that's where I leave it. I don't worry about shifting it manually, which you can do with 2 paddle shifters on your index finger and your thumb. But sport mode works really nice around town and on the road. And then when you hit the off-road, that's when I start using the manual transmission. And it's really fun to use. It's fun not to have to use a clutch and use your foot. But when the going gets really tight off-road, I still prefer manual transmission, because you have the control of the clutch balanced against the brakes to control yourself at really slow speeds, where you have to really drag the rear brake on a DCT to get that control, and it's still a little herky-jerky in comparison. It's just not as smooth, which can lead to some errors off-road. It's got a new chassis. It's meant to be more lively off-road, better handling, and overall, it is. The suspension is really good on the street and off-road. So it has manually adjustable suspension. Adventure Sports actually has electronic suspension. This suspension, they say, is better set up for off-road, where the Adventure Sports is more of a street tour with off-road capability, let's say. We rode on the street first, and it has excellent balance on the street. It's amazing how well they can make a bike with a 21-inch front wheel work. It handles really well, it feels planted, and it just gets around corners really, really well. Off-road, I was expecting maybe kind of the same old story of the Africa Twin, where it's good, but it's not great, but it's actually better. The little off-road loop we did, which we didn't do a whole lot because we're on street type tires instead of knobbies, there were some whoops, and it actually went through the whoops almost like a dirt bike. I wouldn't say you can smash them and blast across top of them, but you're not gonna get out of control and you're not gonna get kicked around, and it won't do anything funny on you. In terms of ergonomics, it's a mixed bag on this thing. It still has the same seat height as the previous model, which is not that high on the standard model. It's 34.3 inches, but on the Adventure Sports, which had a notoriously tall seat, it now shares the seat height with the standard model of that 34.3 inches. That part is really nice. Leg room, excellent. The seat, very comfortable. What I do have an issue though is standing up. The bars always seem to be a little bit too far back. So when you're standing up, it feels like you're kind of having to pull yourself up to the front of the bike because you're not leaned over enough to support your weight. So it's a little awkward standing up, more so on fire roads and things like that. Once you really start banging off-road and bouncing through those whoops and things like that, you don't notice it. But if you're standing up on fire roads and things like that, you will notice it. In the rider modes, you've got traction control settings, and those are better than they were on the 2019 model. 2019 model, we'll say the space between each level, 7 levels, was this much. Well, now it's spaced out over this much. So each change is a bigger step from 2019. So they're more noticeable, and definitely you get more of a range of traction control. The highest level is a little more intrusive, and the lowest level lets it slide even more. So that is a big thumbs up on this bike. One thing you do notice about this bike, it's getting into summertime now. It seems like there's a bit more engine heat now with the larger capacity. Tended to notice on my legs, going down the freeway, the way that the heat would come off of the bike, kind of eddy behind my legs, and you could feel the heat on the back of your legs. So I didn't notice that before on the older model, but more power, more heat, just the way it goes. I'll take the trade-off because it's way more fun to ride. Overall, it's still a great motorcycle. It's really well balanced on-road and off-road, and it's an excellent option for anyone looking for an adventure bike. Price-wise, it's gone up a tiny bit, $800 more than the model before. So with $800 though, you do get more performance, you get better suspension, you get better handling, and you get a TFT dash that is so-so. Overall, I still give it a thumbs up, and we're gonna continue riding it, throw it on the dyno, get weights, get measures, and that'll all be in the article. As always, if you like what we're doing, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends, and if you have any questions or comments, put them down below. We'll see you next time.